Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a phenomenon that is literally rewiring global e-commerce as we know it. We're talking about a shopping app with 1.2 billion users that offers prices so incredibly low they honestly seem impossible. From their absolutely ingenious supply chain mechanics down to some very deep psychological triggers. And yeah, a few pretty major geopolitical controversies along the way, we're going to unpack exactly how they do it. To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this, we have to look back at their Western debut in 2023. They dropped a cool $7 million for just 30 seconds of Super Bowl airtime, just to tell us all to shop like a billionaire. And honestly, it was an absolute masterclass in user acquisition. Immediately following that ad, the app saw a 45% spike in downloads. They picked up 20 million new active users practically overnight. That is explosive, instantaneous growth that most established tech companies spend a decade chasing. But hey, a clever ad only works if there's already a massive appetite for what you're selling, right? Take a look at the European markets, using Italy as a prime example here. In 2024, the average online spend was roughly 1,620 euros. But look at the projection for 2025. It practically doubles to 3,290 euros per user. As inflation bites hard and the cost of living just keeps skyrocketing, consumers are aggressively hunting for any way to stretch their paychecks. This app arrived at the exact moment shoppers were desperate for a real economic lifeline. Now, you might think this empire just popped up out of nowhere, but tracing their timeline reveals some seriously methodical planning. Back in 2010, giants like Alibaba were dominating business-to-business trade. But around 2015, a former Google engineer named Colin Wang saw a massive gap in the market. Instead of focusing on wealthy city dwellers, he created Pinduoduo to connect rural Chinese farmers directly with consumers. And it worked brilliantly. He established PDD Holdings in 2018 to gear up for global expansion, which paved the way for Temu's US launch in 2022, right before the holidays, and then culminated in that giant 2023 Super Bowl campaign. So this infrastructure actually took over a decade to perfect. Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating. They completely flipped the traditional retail model right on its head. Most legacy retailers use what's called a push model. They guess what you and I will want months in advance, they buy massive amounts of stock, they store it in giant warehouses, and they just cross their fingers and hope it sells. If they guess wrong, that unsold inventory absolutely destroys their bottom line. But this app, they use an ingenious consumer-to-manufacturer, or C2M, approach. They don't guess at all. They identify demand in real time, test in tiny batches, and only scale up what's already proven to sell. Let's break down exactly how this C2M cycle works in practice. Step 1. The algorithm identifies a rising trend. Let's say a specific style of wallet. Step 2. Instead of ordering 100,000 units blindly, they run a micro-test with manufacturers for just a few hundred pieces. Step 3. They watch user behavior like a hawk. How many clicks is it getting? Are people adding it to their carts? And finally, step 4. If the data looks good, they scale up production and ship it directly from the factory right to your door. It totally eliminates the middleman and all that warehouse risk. But there's a catch. This system forces suppliers into weekly auctions, competing against each other just for visibility on the app, which squeezes their profit margins to the absolute bare minimum. So supply chain efficiency is incredible, but that's only half the battle. Navigating international red tape is a whole other beast, and they expertly exploit a major regulatory loophole here, the minimum customs threshold. In the European Union, for example, goods valued under 150 euros are totally exempt from certain customs duties. Normally, if you buy 200 euros worth of clothes, you're getting hit with a 12% tax plus VAT plus handling fees. So how do they get around it? By simply splitting your large order into smaller individual packages that fall right under that 150 euro mark. It's a completely legal, highly calculated strategy to keep that final price artificially low. And they aren't just undercutting on product prices, they're aggressively undercutting the platforms they compete against too. Look at this comparison. If you want to be a third-party seller on Amazon, you're paying a monthly fee of €39.99 euros plus VAT, and you're handing over a commission of 8 to 15% on every single sale you make. But starting in 2024, Temu opened its doors to local third-party sellers with an unbelievable offer, 0 monthly fees and 0 commissions. By completely removing the financial friction for sellers, they make sure the prices listed on their app remain vastly more competitive than anywhere else on the internet. All right, so we've reached the elephant in the room. If they are squeezing suppliers, bypassing customs, and charging 0 fees to their sellers, how are they actually making any money? Well, the truth is, right now, they aren't. In fact, their profit margins are so deep in the red, they almost look like a typo. Current estimates suggest the platform actually loses around $30 on every single order shipped to the United States, and they lose about $1 on every order shipped to Europe. They are willingly bleeding billions just to get these cheap products into your hands. Now, you might be wondering how any company on Earth survives taking those kinds of massive hits. The answer lies with their parent company, PDD Holdings. This whole operation is a calculated, massive loss leader strategy, completely bankrolled by the wild success of its older sister app, Pinduoduo, over in China. To give you an idea of the war chest we're talking about here, Pinduoduo reported a net profit of around $3.5 billion in the third quarter of 2025 alone. So their goal right now isn't immediate revenue. It is aggressively conquering global market share and starving out the competition until they are practically the only viable option left. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about the user experience, because the app's interface is arguably just as engineered as its supply chain. The absolute second you open it, you are bombarded with roulette wheels, mini-games, and temporary coupons. This heavily taps into something called the Endowment Effect. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon where we place an irrationally high value on something the moment we feel it belongs to us. So when you win a 90% off coupon through a little digital minigame, your brain literally registers it as your property. You end up buying things you never even intended to, simply because letting that coupon expire feels like you're losing a prize you rightfully won. And they combine that sense of ownership with another super powerful psychological trigger: artificial scarcity. As you're browsing, you'll see these aggressive ticking countdown timers everywhere. You'll see bright red text warning you that an item is almost sold out, even when there are literally thousands of units sitting in a factory somewhere. They also show heavily inflated original list prices crossed out right next to the new, ridiculously low price, just to make it feel like you were getting the deal of a lifetime. Make no mistake, these aren't just cute aesthetic design choices. They are highly calculated mechanisms designed to bypass your logical decision-making process, transforming a casual browser into a totally impulsive buying machine. But as you can probably guess, these hyper-aggressive tactics haven't gone unnoticed. Regulators are really starting to push back. Recently, the European Commission officially launched formal proceedings to investigate the platform. Their primary concern here is that the app's interface, with all its gamification and endless scrolling, utilizes what might be an illegal, addictive design. Regulators are impartially questioning whether these psychological tools manipulate consumers to a degree that actually violates digital consumer protection laws. And the scrutiny goes far beyond just our consumer spending habits. It dives into some pretty deep digital controversies. An independent U.S. firm called Grizzly Research did an extensive analysis of the app's code, and they released a report detailing several really startling allegations. According to their findings, the app requests permissions way beyond what a typical shopping app needs. We're talking access to your microphone, your camera, and even biometric data like FaceID. Furthermore, they allege the presence of dynamic media projection code, and they suspect this could theoretically allow the app to monitor your screen activity even when you aren't actively using the application. This brings us to the immense geopolitical anxiety underlying the entire platform. Western regulators view these data collection allegations through the lens of international law. Specifically, they point to Article 7 of China's 2017 National Intelligence Law, which basically mandates that organizations must support and cooperate with state intelligence work. So when you combine this legal obligation with alleged strategic ties between PDD Holdings and state-affiliated data firms, independent watchdogs are expressing some severe concerns. The prevailing theory from these analysts is that if the state ever demanded user data for national security purposes, the company would be legally compelled to hand over that vast treasure trove of global consumer behavior. Because of these deep-water concerns regarding data privacy and market dominance, the regulatory net is closing in fast. Over in the United States, lawmakers are aggressively demanding transparency and calling for an immediate halt to excessive data collection. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European Union has officially designated the app as a VLOP, a very large online platform. Now, that isn't just a fancy title. It's a serious legal categorization that completely strips away the platform's ability to self-regulate. It places them under incredibly strict surveillance, mandatory audits, and extremely careful monitoring by European authorities. So where does that leave all of us? On one hand, this app is an absolute, undeniable marvel of modern logistics. It cuts out the middlemen and provides an incredibly powerful inflation-busting tool for everyday consumers who just want affordable goods. But on the other hand, the exact mechanisms making those impossibly low prices possible are aggressively squeezing manufacturers, threatening local businesses who simply can't compete, and raising some really profound questions about the harvesting of our personal data. The system works flawlessly by design, but it forces us to ask, is the thrill of buying like a billionaire truly worth the hidden costs occurring off-screen? It's definitely something to consider the next time you spend that digital roulette wheel. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.